Should you buy a PlayStation 3 in 2018? The PS3 was released originally back in 2006, and since then has had a bunch of games, peripherals, and even several console redesigns. But should you buy one nowadays? Well, that's what we're going to discuss on today's video. Welcome to Stuff We Play, where I unfortunately do not have 3 PS3s. But if that's okay with you, why not subscribe? So today, we're talking about the PlayStation 3. Everything and anything about it. A buying guide of sorts, much in the same vein as my other buying guides, such as my 3DS buying guide. It's somewhere up there. So without further ado, let's get right into it. PlayStation 3 was released back in 2006. It was a strange console that could support this new format called Blu-ray. Ooh. And I ultimately didn't get one until a few years later because it was $700 in its original form. God, it was probably going to be more expensive originally, especially with that funky looking controller it had when it was announced. The first model had some flaws. If I remember correctly, it had some reliability issues. So they later released a redesigned slim model, and that was the version I ultimately got. Those are supposedly more reliable, though funnily enough, I ended up having one's disk drive die on me. Granted, I got the infamous Street Fighter X Tekken, and upon popping that game disc in my PS3 Slim, the disk drive just died immediately. I think it's Street Fighter X Tekken's fault for killing it. So years go by, and then finally the PS4 comes out, and around that time they released this, the PS3 Slim. And this model, what's nice is the earlier models had a motorized disc tray. This one doesn't. Ooh, it has Sonic Generations in there. But yeah, this one has a spring-loaded disc tray. It's definitely the cheapest looking PS3, but like all of them, it feels very solid and well built. PS3s are pretty cheap nowadays. I bought mine PS3 Super Slim, that's the third revision, back in 2016 for a whopping $90. However, if you want one of the original launch model PS3s, that might run you about $150 or so, and that's for one reason: backwards compatibility. Every model of PS3, along with being able to play games off disc for the PS3 and download games from PlayStation Network, could play PlayStation 1 games off the disc. What about the PlayStation 2, I hear some of you asking. The very first model of the PS3 had hardware emulated PS2 compatibility, and the system would be able to play them because it would literally have had an actual PS2 shoved inside. And after that, they took it out entirely, and you can't play PS2 games. If you really just want to play PS3 games, ignore all of what I just said and get a PS3 Super Slim. I feel especially if you get a later model PS3, you should have no issues. PSN's still alive, and there's a ton of great games for it. One of the best things about the PS3 was the games. The beautiful thing about PS3 games is that at the making of this video, you can still buy it at your local EB Games, GameStop, whatever your local major game chain is, and of course at any mom and pop game store, and they're cheap. The most expensive PS3 game I've come across, that's not a special edition, this was a generation when special editions became huge, and yeah, I'm not getting into those. The most expensive game I've gotten in the past year was this, which is Persona 5. And why is that? Because this was a late release PS3 game, and as such, I found my copy new. Well, what games would I specifically recommend for the PS3? Well, I can safely say there's something for everyone here. You have your shooters, of course, you have your platformers, your racers. In fact, the main reason I originally wanted a PS3 was for Gran Turismo 5. It's unfortunately not a game I have anymore, but I do have Gran Turismo 6. It's such a great game. You can't go wrong with Gran Turismo, and especially with a force feedback steering wheel. It's such a solid racing experience that I just can't recommend it enough. But there are 5 more games I have here with me to go over. Persona 5. I already brought this up, but this game is also on PlayStation 4. In fact, it's probably better on that system. Pretty much the plot is you're part of a group called the Phantom Thieves, living in Japan, you're high school students, and the soundtrack is amazing. Akiba's Strip, it's It's not a great game, okay? Pretty much there are these vampire-like guys going about, and the best way to kill them is you actually have to strip them. Like, there's no nudity here, but you literally strip them down, and the sunlight burns their skin up and stuff. It's such a silly, stupid game, but I bought it for a whopping $6, and you know what? At that price, yeah, I'd like to go around Akiba, ripping clothes off of people to make them burn up in the sun, and then to also play weird arcade games and stuff. The next game I'm going to recommend is a multi-platform game, but it's one I feel obligated to mention as I'm a Sonic fanboy, and that's Sonic Generations. You can play as either modern Sonic, playing much like he did in the daytime stages of Sonic Unleashed, or classic Sonic, who here tries to replicate how he played in the classic games on the Sega Genesis. He's not one-to-one, but it's very solid. The stages here are fun and all based off of previous titles up to this point in the series and features bosses such as Metal Sonic or Perfect Chaos for you to fight with again, and it's an absolute blast. The next game I'd recommend is a horror game, another one that's on other systems, and another one that apparently has performance problems on the PS3, though I haven't noticed a ton, and that's Alien Isolation. You're playing as Amanda Ripley and you're going through this ship. It's been 15 years after the Alien films, and there's an actual xenomorph lurking around. And what's incredible about the xenomorph here is its adaptive AI. For example, there are vents scattered around the ship, and if the AI realizes, oh, you aren't hiding in the vents or whatnot, well, it's going to start hiding there so it can attack you. I loved this game for the entirety of my playthrough. And the final game I'm going to mention of these recommendations is a game that's the best Zelda game that's not a Zelda game. And that's 3D Dot Game Heroes. It's everything that a Zelda 4 should have been, you know. I mean like a Link to the Past style Zelda 4. Pretty much you're going through this medieval world that's made up of pixely graphics, but 3D of course. And you have a giant sword that takes up half the screen when you're at full health. And you go through dungeons and towns and you collect hearts and stuff like that. Perhaps one of the coolest things here in 3D Dot Game Heroes though is you. Instead of having a static character, though there is a base character you can use, you can actually create your own character. If you want to, you can play a Zelda game essentially as a tank. It's great. It's fun. You're doing yourself a disservice by not buying 3D Dot Game Heroes. So that's cool and all, but what else can you do besides games? Well, let's get into that in the next section. What can a PS3 do besides your traditional style games? Well, of course you can use like Netflix and Hulu and whatnot, and there were a variety of peripherals. There are several versions of the controller, the first one being a 6-axis, but don't get that, get the DualShock 3. It's more prolific, and the only difference is this original 6-axis PS3 controller didn't have rumble features. Along with that, there's of course your stuff like DDR pads, Rock Band instruments, but one that I would quickly like to bring up here is this, the PlayStation Move. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, this thing right here is essentially a Wiimote with a glowing ball on the top. It's compatible with the PlayStation camera, and there's also a little wireless nunchuck-like thing you can use for your right hand. Not a ton of games use this. I have one, but it's Sports Champions. It's pretty much just a more boring version of Wii Sports. I know there's a version for the PS4 now that goes along with the PSVR, and a lot of those games use it. Is there any reason to really buy the PS3's version of PlayStation Move?
No.
Now, these peripherals are great and all, and a lot of you YouTubers out there are like, wow, this is a great budget console I could get. Perhaps not. One issue I have had with the PlayStation 3 is it's HDMI out. Mainly it has HDCP encoding, and unlike on the PlayStation 4, you can't turn it off. What does that mean? Essentially, if you try to use HDMI out with a capture card to capture gameplay footage from a PlayStation 3, all you'll get is a black screen with no audio. For mine, to get around that, I had to get component cables. But as I know some TVs nowadays don't even have component inputs, if you aren't able to use component cables, maybe this isn't great for you if you're a YouTuber. However, something that I will bring up as well, which I think is important to bring up, because I know this was actually a selling point for a few people. The PS3 could function as a Blu-ray player. I remember when I got mine, I found that out. That was crazy, because my parents were actually wanting to get a Blu-ray player. But then I was like, no, Mom, Dad, my PlayStation can play Blu-rays. Seriously, if you want a great Blu-ray player, get a PS3. If you don't own a Blu-ray player or a PS4, or if you want to play 4K Blu-rays, maybe you're better off getting an Xbox One S. But unlike an Xbox One, this actually has games for you to play on it. But anyways, before I go off on snarking other consoles for a bit, do you think you should buy a PlayStation 3 in 2018? I personally think that if you have the money for one, and if you want a new PlayStation console to add to your collection, this is the one to get. I'll be honest, for probably about $100, you can get a PS3 Super Slim, a controller or two, and a few great games. And that sounds awesome. And it's something that is well built and will last you for years to come. So, should you buy a PS3 in 2018? If you haven't, yeah, do it. But anyways, leave your thoughts on this console down in the comment section below. But more than that, leave me your memories of the PlayStation 3 or any PlayStation console down there as well. And while you're at it, why don't you subscribe to Stuff We Play for more great content like this. If you enjoyed this video, why not support us on Patreon? So with that, thank you very much for watching. Stay classy, and I will see you next time.